episode of Called and Chosen, the series in which we're focusing a little bit more on the men who God has called to serve in the beautiful sanctuaries that we have to worship Him. And so today we have a very special guest with us, a good friend of mine. I studied with him in the seminary for a while. Father Alex Pareda, who is the pastor of St. John Newman Parish here in San Antonio. He was also vocation director for the Archdiocese for a little while. And so, Father Alex, it is great to have you with us here on the episode. And I want to start as we do all of our episodes, if you'll just tell us your vocation story.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks. I'm honored. I've seen your program before, and I think you did another one where you went around learning about the history of some of the parishes. But my vocation story is a long one, Father Scott. I entered seminary in 2000, but was discerning since '96. And at the time, I believe Father Carlos Velasquez was vocation director. And then he moved on a year after, and Sister Jane, fire, Lord help me. Well, after he left, then we waited for another vocation director. And then I after discerning 2 years with the vocation director and going to retreats and discernment things, I finally entered 2 years later. And at that time, they really didn't have a pre-theology program. And so I was sent to Camarillo, California. Mm-hmm. There I did my philosophy, and then came home when I completed my studies there and entered there at Assumption, studied at Oblate. I was ordained in 2008, along with Father Steve Gavis, who you know well, we all know well. We were both ordained by then Archbishop Gomez. Mm-hmm. He was the Archbishop, and so it was an interesting experience because I was not doing my early formation here in our own diocese. I was in Los Angeles. Then completed the last 4 years here with our diocese. But at that time, it allowed me to get to know our own community as a seminarian, and also be able to study with my other brother seminarians with our own diocese, San Antonio guys. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that time, when I entered, Father Leopold was still a seminarian, Father Lenin, Father Pancho Francisco, and Father Maurer, all those guys were still in the seminary, and Father Dennis Arechiga. Yeah. So it's interesting because, of course, they were well ahead of me. They were probably in their last 2 years when I first entered. But I was glad to come home because, again, I was studying for this archdiocese, and coming to complete my studies here then allowed me to understand the needs of San Antonio community, the Church of San Antonio. And in 2008, I was ordained, and my first assignment was actually here, 2008 for 1 year only. Okay. And immediately after 1 year, I was asked to go to Holy Trinity, which kind of freaked me out because it was a mega parish, and fairly new, maybe 25 years. So it was a young community. Mm-hmm. So coming here to St. John Newman within the first year, right away I saw that it was a basically retired military community. And now I returned here in 2018, and it's still the same. It hasn't changed. It's still retired families. But yes, my priesthood then took me from Holy Trinity after 3 years to go to the vocation office, as you mentioned. And I was there 6 years. So that was another learning experience. Mm-hmm. I knew nothing about recruiting young men to come into priesthood. I was asked to go there. There was no handbook. And so it was kind of like, you learn as you go. But I was blessed that I had Sister Jane Gavlik, who was there. Mm-hmm. God bless her. She basically showed me what needed to get done, and I followed her lead because she had already been there. Ana Borjorquez, the sister of Bishop Arturo, and she too, two great individuals. I don't know that I could have learned what I did without them. They were very instrumental. After a couple of years, I found my rhythm. I knew what I needed to do and how to get it done. And we flourished. The office flourished with seminarians. It was growing. The numbers were growing. It was great. And at the same time, I was asked, because as vocation director, you know, you don't have a parish of your
Yeah.
own. So I would celebrate weekend masses wherever folks needed help. And I was given Somerset. So I was vocation director and pastor of St. Mary's Somerset. And then I took on a second parish, St. Peter the Fisherman. So I had three areas to focus on. So it was challenging, but I think learning how to manage it to where I'd be able to do the ministry in all three areas without letting myself to get overwhelmed. I was able to manage it. And I'm going to start year 15 already this May. And
You're quinceañera.
golly. And so it like time flies by. But I still see myself, even though I'll be starting year 15 as a young priest compared to, you know, some of our older priests who have celebrated their jubilees. We just recently, last fall, had this past fall, had our convocation, and we honored Roberta's 70 years, was it 70 years of his jubilee?
Like 70 years.
And I'm not going to reach that. I know I won't. I'm not going to reach 70 years. That guy got ordained when he was 24, baby. And I was considered a later vocation because I entered at the age of 30. So I was considered a late vocation. Today, not so much so, because we are getting men, you know, about that age bracket and over. So yeah, I still consider myself still young into the ministry, even though I've learned a lot. I've been a pastor. I've been vocation director, and so I know what needs to get done in regards to the ministry, but it always depends on the kind of parish we're at. In Somerset, it was a little country parish. Both parishes were country parishes. My parishioners were farmers, cowboys, and they raised cattle and horses, and they grew milo and corn. So the ministry is different. And when I was at Holy Trinity, they were all folks that were professionals, doctors, attorneys, plastic surgeons, and realtor company folks. So the ministry is different. Here, it's retired military community. So I have 4 nursing home areas that we focus on. The ARC, which is the Army Retired Community, and all my family's here. So the ministry and the needs are different. And I think as being a pastor and a priest, we learn that. I still don't claim to know everything. I don't. I feel that there's always room to grow.
Yeah.
Always room to allow ourselves to learn. And so yeah, that's been my experience so far.
Yeah.
You know.
And you're one of the few that we have in our archdiocese that we refer to as a local vocation. You grew up in this area?
I was born and raised here in San Antonio, but I wasn't raised Catholic. You know, I received my sacraments at St. Paul on Easter Vigil of '99 with Father Jimmy Drennan.
Okay.
And I'm going to plug that name in because he'll kill me if I don't. Father Jimmy Drennan was a very important role in my ministry. Had it not been for him, I was looking to be a religious, like a Trappist. And he saw within me that just like I saw another, when as vocation director, another young man that came to me, and I said, no, my friend, you're not diocesan. You have a religious calling to religious life, and now he's with the religious community. And Jimmy saw that in me, and I remember I would meet with him. I wrote a long letter about my journey as a Protestant, you know, hardcore Calvinist, my friend. And so I had a conversion, and he assisted me through it. He made it work to where I finally got accepted, and I remember the first 2 weeks in Camarillo, California, and I had a freak out moment. And I called him up and I said, get me out of here. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I quit my job, I left my home. The next day, he flies all the way over there. And he stayed there with me that whole week. We lodged in there. And had he not done that, I probably would have left on my own. I would have just come home. But that again tells me a lot about his priesthood and his part to work also with other individuals that are desiring, you know, to answer their call.
Yeah.
God bless him, you know. And so yeah, he was very instrumental that way. And so yes, I am local, born and raised here in San Antonio.
So, Alex, we talked a little bit about your coming into the church, you became Catholic.
Yes.
Now, that route, I know I've heard the story a little bit, but it was a very interesting route. It was influenced, I would say, to some degree by a very important character in the church.
Yes, I was a young teenager, Father Scott, of course, a very strong Protestant Calvinist. And when John Paul visited San Antonio, I think it was 87, and I was a young teenager, and then I went there with some friends of mine, and there was thousands of people, and we were there passing out anti-Catholic propaganda. Of course, no one knew what it was; they were just taking it, and somehow I lost my friends among all of those thousands of people, and yeah, we were there protesting in some way John Paul's visit. Of course, young, ignorant, not knowing what I know now. All that played a role in my conversion because I was like a young Paul, persecuting the church, and thinking that I was doing the right thing for God, and little did I know that very experience was going to be part of my conversion into the Catholic faith, and so it remains there as something that I remember, that by the grace of God, He brought it about. And the interesting thing is that my first 6 months of being ordained, we had a convocation, and I was asked to do the homily, and it was on Paul's letter to Timothy, and I used that story to build my homily upon. And so Gomez didn't know about that incident. You know, he told me he didn't know about my conversion because I talked about that story, and then the next day his secretary calls me up and she says, Gustavo was going to have that USCCB meeting, asked if he could get my notes because he wanted to use part of it for the message he was going to give, because I was ordaining the year of St. Paul, and it was still pretty much the year of St. Paul, and so I said, I don't have notes, but I can give him something that if he wants to use it. So yes, it's amazing how the Lord brought that about. I was so far outside of the Catholic faith, not knowing that God had a plan, and God used that experience and other experiences to bring me into the faith. And here I am, you know, a Catholic priest now, all these years, and defending the very faith that I used to, in some ways, persecute.
Yeah. I've always loved that story. That's why I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about it, because I think it influenced me to some degree to listen to that. And growing up kind of sheltered and in the small community that I grew up in, it took me probably into high school before I realized there was such a thing as someone not Catholic. Because I was looking around the cafeteria during Lent one day and said, wait a minute, why are you eating a hamburger on Friday? And my friends would look at me and say, well, because I'm not Catholic. I said, what do you mean you're not Catholic? I thought everybody was Catholic. That's just the way I grew up. And so it's always been a part of that story. And it tells us that God calls us from everywhere.
Yes.
He calls us from every walk of life. I mean, you probably have had people walk in when you were the vocation director and say, this guy, God, are you sure about this one? It's kind of like that encounter with the prophet, and he's going through David's family. He says, this one for sure is going to be the next king. He says, nope, that's not him. He says, and he looks at David and he's like, this one? The other ones were a lot taller, they looked better, they knew what they're doing. And there's been probably those times we look and we say, you know what, God, this one for sure is going to be a priest. Doesn't work out. And the one we think there's no way he's ever going to make it. He's serving the church and doing wonderful work out in the parishes. And it's just the beauty of the priesthood for us.
Amen. I said priesthood is a different calling, where yes, all those things are part of it, but it's a different kind of calling because it's sacramental, you know. And so I would distinguish that with them, and then see if they were involved in those things in their parish. I would ask them their name of their pastor, how are you involved in your parish? If they're going to church, if they don't know their name of their pastor, then clearly they're not involved in their parish. Mm-hmm. And those things I would look for. You got to tell me, oh yeah, I help with catechism, I help with youth ministry. Then that lets me know that they are engaged in their faith in some way. And then I would discern with them further. Seminary, I would let them know, doesn't mean you're going to be a priest. you're there to deepen that discernment that you feel you're being called. And you'll know after a while whether, yes, this is what God has called you to, along with the formators that are there to guide, your spiritual directors and your external formators. They'll guide you through all that. So entering seminary doesn't mean you will be a priest. It's to deepen that call.
I think that helps because we encounter so much, there's a fear of taking that step and getting into the seminary.
Yeah.
We always used to joke, we don't count our seminarians until they're actually in the bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there seems to be this fear, if I go to the seminary, they're going to lock me in and make me be a priest.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
No.
No. They. We had freedoms, of course, but there was accountability. Have to be there at morning prayer, be there at evening prayer, be there at daily mass. Do well academically. If they're not cutting it academically, well then maybe you need to go take care of that outside, and then come contact us afterwards, because it's as you and I know now that it's a lot of money. A lot of money. We pay their full formation, and it's a lot of money. So we have to look at those things. Are they doing well spiritually? Are they doing well pastorally? Are they doing well in their human development, growing in their identity, who they are, and academically, their intellectual formation? Those things have to be up to par.
Yeah. Now, I know I've encountered in my own parishes, I'll talk to young men, and it's like I'm proposing an idea to them that they never had thought was a reality in their life, that, you would make a good priest. Yeah. And so, what would you attribute? How can we grow this idea in our diocese of a culture of vocation, where we find less and less of these young men are shocked when we tell them that you might make a good priest, and they never had considered it as a possibility for their life?
I think what they need to see is that we're happy priests, and that we're happy in the ministry of priesthood. If they always see a priest complaining, oh, I got to do another mass, that's not healthy. You know, we should look forward to it. I know. Like I said, a lot of our clergy are overwhelmed sometimes, because some of them have three parishes that they are taking care of, and so that can get overwhelming. But yeah, if they see that we're happy doing our ministry, that might inspire them then to consider it even further. If they feel like they're being called, but there's a fear of it, and Father Steve and I, we talk regularly, and that's one of the things we talk about, that priesthood, it's not for the weak. You have to be a strong person to live out the life of a priest or priesthood, because it's demanding. And I always see it like in the military, like the Marines. Remember that old commercial, the few, the proud, and so not everyone is called to serve that way, the same way in the priesthood. It is a calling, a higher calling, and you have to be a strong person to live out the life of the priesthood, because it is demanding.
Yeah.
It is demanding that way.
It is. Now, how would you describe this one? What is a regular day in the life of Alex Pereira as a priest?
Well, again, it always goes back to the parish community that we're in. This is a military retired community. I don't really have teenagers here. Like, our youth ministry is probably 20 kids. When I was at Holy Trinity, I would get 500 kids at the evening mass. There are sightings of teenagers here, but they're mostly the grand kiddos of our families. So, I have daily mass, of course, duties of returning calls. Every day, you have stacks of messages, and they're all over my desk. Then you have emails, and your phone is flashing because there's phone calls, and any other calls that come into the front part. And so I have an open door policy where if anyone shows up, Father, Mrs. So-and-so is here, she says if you have a couple of minutes. I drop everything, I said yes, I'll be there, or send them in the office. Because most of the times, that's really all they want, is a couple of minutes. Instead of telling that person, well, do they have an appointment, tell them they need to make an appointment. In my perspective, that's not healthy. Because really all they want is a couple of minutes. And so that's my open door policy. Every day, daily mass, there's always hospital calls or home calls, of course, you know, Father Scott, meetings of all kind, always, and that's part of it. It's part of our priesthood daily that we are, first of all, we are pastors, we are sacramental, that is number one. Then we are also administrators. We have to work with the buildings, the budgets. You have a staff. We have a building maintenance that we need to be looking at, budgeting, hiring, or do we need to repair this or that? So we wear many hats. You're a counselor, right? People need counseling, whether it's spiritual, pastoral counseling, or something beyond that. We're everything to everybody, like Paul says. I am all things to all men for the sake of the gospel.
Exactly.
And that's what we have to do. So, yeah, part of it is to learn to pace ourselves with that, because remember the gospel when Jesus is going in the crowd and everyone's pulling on him, and the disciples are pushing them away, you know, because they're all coming at him. And Jesus said, "Who touched me? Someone touched me. I felt my power come out of me." But then he would break away. He always went away alone. He knew when to do it. And that's what I do. When I feel like it's already getting too much, then I just let my staff know, okay, I'm out of pocket. I'll see you guys tomorrow. They can always get a hold of us, right?
Yeah.
You have a cell phone if anything important comes up. But that's what I do at times. I'm done. I'm out of pocket. I'll see you all tomorrow. And that's the daily life, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, it's very rare. I know for myself at least, and I'm sure it happens for you. You wake up in the morning, we pull up our calendar, we look, oh look, I got a fairly light day today. Very rarely does the calendar stay what we look at whenever we woke up in the morning.
Yeah. Well, even just you and I trying to set up this meeting, we were looking at each other's calendar. Well, how about this day? How about that day? Until we were able to agree on a time and day.
Yeah.
And you know, and we're also I do spiritual direction for some people, not too many, because that takes time too. And even that, trying to work with him, you know, set up a time and day that's going to work. Yeah, so our calendar changes month to month, and according to the liturgical season as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the life of a priest is, I have found that outstanding and amazing in a lot of ways. It's exhausting in many ways, but I can never say I've ever been bored.
Amen. Because there's a joy to it, Father Scott. There's a joy to it, at least, you know, like I said, we need to learn to be happy priests. I still love what I do. It still feels all new, like your honeymoon. I still love what I do, and I can't see myself doing anything else with my life. God knew from the beginning. I thought I was going to be a rock star. But, you know, it's like that old saying, right? Tell God your plans and see you want to make him laugh. But God knew everything. It's providential. It was in his mind what our lives were going to be, and we answered and followed, and yeah, it's been great. It's still great, and I'm grateful to the fraternity in our diocese with our brother priests. When we have our clergy days and convocations and things like that, I do my very best to be present. Today, I think this week, I just couldn't make the clergy meeting. But our last convocation, were you there? You were there? It was great. We hadn't had one because of the COVID. So when that one took place, it was like the numbers were there. It was amazing, the joy, the fraternity. I was energized about my priesthood all over again, because those 2 years of COVID kind of put a cloud, I think, over many of us in our ministry. A lot changed. But when I went to that convocation, it was like I was quickened all over again. It was quickened, where I thought, I was happy just to see my brother priest, and it sparked within me that joy of the fraternity, of the priesthood, and come back to the ministry, to our parishes with that joy again. So I thank God for the grace that many times will like we need it. We need that, you know.
Yeah.
Like Elijah, right?
Exactly.
The angel came and tells him, eat, drink, rest, because you have a lot.
A long journey to go.
Yeah. And sometimes we need to do that. We need to do what Elijah did so that we still have a long journey to go.
Exactly. So we mentioned a little bit COVID. We've been dealing with all of that situation. How have you seen your ministry evolve I think a lot of times we looked at it and we thought it would all be negative, all the changes that happened because of COVID. Have you seen your ministry evolve through COVID?
I think it made us more aware of how we approach each other. I know that when it first started, it limited our movements. It limited on how we relate to each other, at least physically greeting each other. But it opened us up to an area that maybe we were already there, technology-wise, internet, and streamlining and online this and online that. It pushed us even further towards that, so that now we as church are all about the QR code and everything online and Facebook and Twittering and all that stuff. Although personally I don't do it, but we do have our St. John Newman Facebook, our St. John Newman online stuff. So it pushed us towards that. It pushed us to where now we're caught up that way technology-wise to reach more people out there with what we're doing in our parishes and even with our kids. So yeah, I think in some ways, if we can find anything positive about this pandemic that hopefully we're getting over, is that it pushed us into the technology era even further. We were already there.
Yeah.
It made us go even further with it.
Yeah. We had to commit. I think we tried to straddle the fence a lot in our parishes and our church, and so it pushed us. I can't do as much handouts and paper and different things. I can't shake hands or give hugs as much as I used to. People want that digital footprint a little bit larger.
And one of the things that I did have a fear about was, we did have the dispensation where everyone could watch it at home. But I was happy when it was lifted on Pentecost last year, because that now is an incentive to let the folks know you need to come. Community cannot be done online.
Exactly.
Community needs to be there physically in person, because that is what the Liturgy of the Mass is. We come together physically to pray, to worship, to sing, and to celebrate that Eucharistic meal together, and to see each other, to belong as a church community. It was good that we were able to do it online during that pandemic, but that's done. Folks need to come to church. They need to be there physically. Of course, there are exceptions. Some people are not well or elderly or have disabilities. We're not going to hold that accountable. But the young, the healthy, and those who are able, yes, come to church. You need to be there. It's important. Paul tells us, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves, because he understood community was important. He said, as become a custom of some. So folks, come to church. That's where you're going to find, meaning. You're going to find strength. You're going to find hope and community, which is important. It's important to belong to a church community.
So now let's look a little bit. I know our audience probably is not going to be a lot of teens that are going to be watching this to read a little about the priesthood, but we may have some of those who are families and grandparents watching their grandkiddos. What are some practical things we can give them advice in to help encourage those youth and their families that they see in the pews around them to consider being a priest?
Well, even when I was vocation director, Michael English, that's a good example. He brought his mom. I remember she was still alive at the time. And Mike was already in his probably mid or early 30s when he entered. And when she was there, I reached out to her and I said, Miss English, I know that this is your son and you're a parent. And you'll never stop being a parent, and you're just concerned, is your son making the right decisions? And I think a lot of times with parents, when the kid, son or daughter expresses that idea about priesthood or religious life, consecrated life, it can be scary, because maybe the parent would wish them to be, a doctor or some other career instead of this type of, we can't call it a career, but this way of life. So I can see that. So I would just encourage parents to nurture that within their child if they see them very active in church. If it's a young person and he's altar serving and he's lecturing and he's in youth ministry, maybe encourage that within them. Son, maybe look into, seminary or talk to your pastor or Father Alex if it's from here. and then we can look at it and discover and bring that out if it's there. You know, that's what I would tell parents: nurture it. If you see it happening, you know, nurture that within your child.
I remember, I haven't been able to find the video as much anymore. There was a video, I believe Mark Wahlberg did a video at one point. He's been very big in talking about his family priest that he got to know with his Catholic faith. And he asked that question, and I think it's one good for all of us to reflect on, is where would we be without our priests? Where would Father Alex be without Father Jimmy Drennan?
Yeah.
Where would, if we didn't have that influence of our priests? And Mark Wahlberg, he talks about, you know, who would bury my grandmother when she dies? Who would do our weddings? Who would baptize my children? Who would bring the Eucharist to me and my family?
Wow.
And I think there's a testimony in that too. We can say, you know, I want my child to be a doctor, a lawyer, be a garbage man, be anything but being a priest.
Yeah.
But then we have to stop and reflect. If I'm constantly discouraging, how is that role going to ever be filled? Right now, I mean, you mentioned it, our priests are very stressed, and we're stretched more even than stressed, because we're having to divide our attention and do stuff because there's so few in our diocese. We talked about it beforehand. Our archdiocese has 18 seminarians. Now, for those that don't understand that, 18 sounds maybe like a decent number until you realize this is 18 guys that'll be ordained in the next 9 years. So we're going to be averaging 1-2 guys a year.
Yeah. Like one only this year.
One guy this year, and a large portion of our clergy are retiring age
or already going to retire. And so we would need at least 5 guys to get ordained every year to even try to catch up. And so, yeah, you're right. That was very awesome insight from Mark Wahlberg. I never seen that, but it's true. And I'm glad that, you know, someone recognizes that all these things would not be possible if it wasn't for the priesthood. All those things, you know, all those sacraments that are administered to the people of God, you know, who's going to do it? And so we need more men. We need more women into religious life as well. Young women, you know, come into religious life because their role in the life of ministry of the church is important as well.
Exactly.
It's important as well. I would even say equally important. Certainly the ministries are different because of, you know, the priesthood and the religious consecrated life, but their ministry is just as important. The religious sisters, religious brothers, you know, we need them as well.
Yes, we need that experience, that witness, I think, is the best way. I remember at my old parish, we had started doing a cooking club with our youth. I would cook in the hall, come up with a recipe. We'd all work together to cook the recipe. It would go okay because I would have decent numbers of kids. And then I brought in a religious sister, Sister Martha Janasek. I don't know if you ever have met Sister Martha. She's in the same order as Sister Jane. And I brought Sister Martha in to help us cook kolaches one time. For those that don't, if you ever get the chance to meet Sister Martha Janasek, her kolaches probably are one of the best in the entire archdiocese. But I brought her in to help the kids cook that, and she had a good time, so she asked to come back. What ended up happening, it became Sister Martha's cooking club. The kids were more excited to see Sister than really even to see me. Because there's a different understanding of that lifestyle, that connection to God. And it was beautiful to watch her interacting with the youth and these kiddos in a way I couldn't to some degree. But that trust they built up with her.
And I remember the name. It's Sister Mia Culpa, Sister Mary Fagan.
Yes.
Who took over the vocation office when Father Carlos left. She too, very instrumental. God bless her. When I was boarding that plane to leave to Camarillo in California, she told me, Alex, those words are still in my head. She goes, Alex, you need to leave this world behind and focus on the one that you're going to enter. And that's what I did. And I told her, I said, Sister, I'm going to bust out of there. You know, in other words, I was telling her, I'm going to get it done so I can come back home. And I did. And she would always remind me of that. And God bless her. She's always faithful to write on anniversaries, on holidays, and letting us know she's praying. Sister Mary Fagan, I love you. And God bless you. God bless you.
Yes, we've all had those people in our lives that really, I think it actually gives us a way to testify what Bishop Gustavo talks about it at a lot of his masses with youth. Vocations doesn't grow on trees. It comes from our families. It comes from those that influence our lives. It really speaks to what you were talking about with mass. It's communal.
Yeah.
It's relational.
Yes.
And that's the reality of ministry. I know for myself and for yourself is I have to be available to the people. I have to be willing to, in the words of Pope Francis, smell like the sheep. If I'm standing over here and say, well, I'm the priest, you stay over there as the laity, we miss so much.
You know, Father Scott, it's been almost a year. A dear parishioner of ours from here, Alex Medrano, he passed away after his battle with the cancer. And I would go see him at home and at the hospital. But his last few weeks, he was back in the hospital. And his wife called and asked, could you come over? He's here at the Northeast Methodist. So I went over, and he was down to, he was wasting away. And he looks at me and his eyes get real wide. He goes, Father, he goes, you're here. He goes, I'm thank you for coming. He says, I know you're busy. I know you're this and that. And he goes, but I thank you for being. I said, Alex, I'm your pastor. I need to be here. I better be here. And that's what you're saying. We need to be able to, the people need to have access to us. I don't like that stuff. Well, do you have an appointment? No, they just want a couple of minutes. And that's all the family wanted me, just to come and pray with him real quick. A few days later, he passed away. Yeah. And so those things impact me very deeply about priesthood. We're shepherds, and we have to be there for the lambs. When they're wounded, we heal their wounds. And those things are important, my friend. All that other part about administration and budgeting and buildings, to me, that takes second place. That's why we have a staff. My first role is sacramental, the salvation of souls. That's what we were told when we got ordained, for the salvation of souls. And it's our role as priests, as pastors, to help our parishioners, our community, our faithful, get them to heaven through the sacraments.
Exactly. Well, I do want to thank you for being a part of our episode today, Alex. You are one of my favorite priests. We talk fairly often, not as often as we used to, but we still talk.
But I remember you in seminary, though. So again, we have that fraternity, Father Scott. I was pretty much in my last few years, and you were starting off with your philosophy. But I'm proud of him because you stayed the course. Remember, you were part of the collegiate program.
I was one of the founding
under Gomez, and all of them left except you. You were the only one of the collegiate program that stayed the course and made it all the way to ordination. So God bless you, my friend.
So I do want to thank everyone for tuning in for our episode today with Father Alex, listening in to these vocation stories. And the question I'll ask you, because as Father Alex did and some of our others have done, they bring up priests that inspired them, that lived and exhibited that example of the Catholic faith. If you have those priests, put them in our comments. Let us know who those priests are. Put a little cross or in memory of if they have passed away. But I think it's good to share their memory, but it's also good for us as we remember them to reflect on the words. I brought it up from that old country song. Who is going to fill their shoes? Who is the next Monsignor Hubertus in our diocese? Who is going to be those priests that, after Alex and I are long gone, to keep that torch of faith going for our grandchildren and our families? So I constantly ask us to remember that question. Who is going to fill their shoes? And maybe we can also ask our kiddos to think, if not them, who else? Who else is going to serve the church? Because as Bishop Gustavo says, vocations do not grow on trees. And so we ask you to continue promoting, talking, asking our young men to become priests, our young women to become sisters and nuns. We need them. You need us to be able to bring this reality of the church into being. And it comes from your questions. We are called from the community. So do not be afraid to ask. Maybe someone is being called to be a priest, and God is using you to bring that person into thinking that that may be a reality for them. Thank you once again for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.
Thank you so much for being a part of watching this vocation video series, and we're excited that you took time to do so. God has a call for each and every one of us, and maybe God is calling you to be a priest or a religious brother or sister. So don't be afraid. God's love is with you, and God will give you the strength to answer that call. If you'd like to speak with me or anyone in the vocation office, or you seek further information, go to our social media, San Antonio Vocations, or just simply look us up, Google us, and you'll find the information, and we'll get information to you as quickly as possible. God bless you, and God be with you.